Nope, it's just streaming to YouTube. We are going live right now, and we are live. Welcome, everyone, to another Open RFC call, NPM RFC call. Appreciate everybody jumping on today. Again, for anybody that missed it, the notes link is in. Feel free to add yourself as an attendee, and we'll go through essentially the agenda that is posted there, as well as the open issue on the RFC's repo. It's a little clipped. That better? Is that better for audio? Okay. So again, you can go add yourself as an attendee there. We will essentially be going through that agenda. Going forward, if you want to get anything on the agenda, we actually are automating this now. So ensuring that a issue or PR on any one of the NPM projects has the label agenda, it will get surfaced at these calls. So everything you see on the agenda today essentially was an item that was labeled with that agenda label. And going forward, that's one way to key up conversations and topics you'd like to bubble up in this forum. Few housekeeping notes. We are live streaming on YouTube. Also, this video call is recorded just in case the stream goes down. And everything here obviously is public. The desired outcomes of this call essentially is an avenue and a channel for us to interact with the community and collaborate with the community on ideas, initiatives, and essentially RFCs that they've provided to us on work that they'd like our team to prioritize and move forward, as well as trying to do our best to update status and essentially give feedback to open PRs and issues. So if that, I think that's pretty much it for housekeeping. Is there any announcements that anybody has or any anything anybody has that they'd like to bring or that isn't potentially on this agenda that we'd like to add to it? Nope. Okay.
Just real, if there's a minute at the end, I was going to ask about like initial thoughts about the RFC for related to the funding field.
Yeah, we can add that for sure. So digging into the first agenda item, essentially issue number 58. This was a poll that we ran after our last call, essentially trying to find another alternating time. So we changed the OpenRFC biweekly initial call time to 2 p.m. on 2 p.m. Eastern on Wednesdays. And it seems like that is the sort of what the majority of folks are okay with. So this is a second poll, and it looks like the outcome is essentially let's stay with 2 p.m. Eastern on Wednesdays going forward. So we don't have to do any work there. We essentially just aren't going to have alternating time slots. We can revisit this in the future if we want to, but I think the action item here is for me is to remove the label here from the agenda, or remove the agenda label, and then to close out this poll. Did anybody have anything they want to speak to that in terms of timing and the days that we are running these meetings? If not, that's great. I'll take that as an action item to close out the ticket. And I'm going to remove the label. Awesome. Okay. Quickly moving on. So PR number 24, unpublished modules returned for 10 gone. Has anybody taken a look at this and could provide any context around this.
Yeah, so this is a reasonable request, I think. It's basically saying that since you can never reuse that same version number again, if you fetch a tarball that has been unpublished, rather than returning 404, we should return a 410 status code. It's a change to the registry, so it does kind of fall outside of the purview of this team somewhat. But then the other aspect of this, the other suggestion is when encountering a 410 gone response from a tarball that's being fetched as part of, because it was stored as the resolved value in a package lock JSON, we should basically re-resolve that to a new version of the same package, right? A new version that meets the requirement. Part of the challenge with this, right? The other workaround that people have today is you just delete your lock file and run npm install again, which can result in updating a whole lot of things. That might not be what you want, right? You want to still stay sort of as locked as possible. The challenge here is, since we're doing that as part of kind of building the ideal tree stage of the process, it does kind of require us to, as we're fetching modules, if you encounter a 410, then walk back to regenerate the ideal tree from that point in the tree. It's not impossible. It just adds probably more complexity than it might seem like at first glance.
Are you going to bake that kind of logic into Arborist or not so much? Because Arborist has the idea of rolling back, right, to the last node?
Well, so it has the idea of rolling back a reification process if there's a failure in reifying, but
okay.
Essentially there's three sort of main stages of an install. The first is or I guess let's call it 4 main stages of the install. The first is we read the packages on disk, like load the actual tree. You skip that for npm CI because we just delete it, assume it's not there. The stage 2 is we build out the ideal tree, and that's based on either the package JSON and then sort of iteratively going through and building up the tree from scratch, or with a lock file, taking that as a shortcut and just saying, well, whatever is in this lock file is my ideal tree, and that's what I'm going to go and create. And then the other, kind of A, B, and then C, that the other possible thing you might have to do in building the ideal tree is to say, like, if you have a lock file, but you run npm install foo, okay, even though I have a lock file, I want to use the lock file as basically the entire ideal tree and then add this one module and go through the tree building steps for that one module. And so we have to fetch the metadata for it and then incorporate it into the tree. And then the third phase, once we have that ideal tree, is to fetch everything and then reify it. Well, I guess fetch everything, and then the fourth phase is reify. Take all of the things that I fetched, all the tarballs I fetched, and dump them out onto disk. So the challenge that this suggestion imposes, which I think is not a bad idea. It's just I'm just calling it out as potentially more complexity than it appears, is if in that third phase where we're fetching all the tarballs, all the artifacts, we encounter a 410, we essentially have to roll back to the second phase of building the ideal tree and sort of restart from that point. This is not the end of the world. It's just something to keep in mind. We could definitely do it for npm 7. It would be pretty onerous to do for npm 6.
Yeah, I think this is like a npm 7 type thing, and also that, like, I don't know, I think there's like perhaps some optimizations that could be made there in the like ideal tree phase. You're figuring out what versions satisfy what, and like a short HTTP request to, like, I mean, I don't know how much time that particular algorithm takes, but a short fetch to the registry to say like, well, I would like this version because it satisfies it, but does it actually exist? And if the answer is true, then keep going. But if the answer is false, then we got a 410, and then like you get you basically suss out what exists and what doesn't exist before you even try and fetch the tarballs and then do the reification. But I mean that then it bloats that step, right? So I think that's
Yeah.
a bit of a seesaw there.
Yeah, so that's just the complexity added by, if we were to accept this. And I think the bigger question, the sort of semantic question is, if I have a lock file or a shrink wrap, and it says you shall have this particular tarball with this particular integrity value, and then that tarball is gone, like, should we fix that problem or should we surface that problem to the
You should see, yeah, I think the surface to that is the best UX to that particular, because then all of a sudden we're saying, like, we're taking liberties, right? And you're saying, oh, that didn't exist, so we just decided to update your deps for you, get the new version, which could be not good.
Right. I mean, presumably you might have locked it for a reason, and now we're basically falling down on our contract of saying that an install will always give you the same thing if you have the same lock file.
Yeah, I really like the idea of an install just failing if it can't fetch a thing, because you said you wanted exactly these things, and I can't do that for you, so figure it out. Or like, here's some steps to figure it out instead of just saying figure it out.
So one way to thread that needle is to say, like, there's a separate command that will sort of redesign the tree when it encounters a 410.
Yeah.
Or when it fails to fetch a tarball.
Yeah.
Which would be probably the ideal user experience, right? Like we surface, we say, like, hey, I couldn't run this install because in the fetch phase, one of the tarballs returned to 410. Run this command and it'll fix the problem.
Yeah, I like that.
Do we want to essentially label this then for npm 7? And I think it feels like it needs some work in terms of that, like fleshing out that specific implementation against this RFC. Like, if you want to give that feedback, Isaac, in a comment, I can properly label this, and we can essentially backlog this discussion until we're ready to essentially take on the work.
Right. Yeah, I think
because it sounds like either we're gonna provide a flag or or command, or
Yeah. So this is only relevant if you're fetching a package version tarball. If an entire package name has been unpublished, then a 404 is more appropriate because it could return.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
It's only when you're downloading or trying to fetch a tarball of a package that's been unpublished.
I think this should really be broken up into 2 bits. I think there's like the registry bit that, I'm being a little bit semantic and like internal work, but like the registry should be updated to do just what Isaac suggested, that if the package name has been completely removed, then you get a 404, and if the particular tarball doesn't exist, then you get a 410. And then there should be an RFC for like the CLI to handle those types of responses from the registry, I think.
Yep.
Right.
If we can have somebody actually follow up then on that, Mike or Isaac, if you guys want to comment essentially on going forward with that, that'd be great. And then we can sort of move on.
Sounds good for me.
Awesome. So PR number 23, Add Singleton Packages RFC. I know there's been a lot of discussion about this for quite a while. Isaac, do you want to maybe speak to this initially? Also, I know Jordan may have some insight into also like, the work that's been happening in the modules team around, and discussions around Singleton packages.
Yeah, I would like somebody else to talk about this first.
I'm wondering if I don't know if we have the original author, obviously we don't have them on the call, but yeah. Has anybody else looked at this?
What I'm confused as to, I haven't read. They basically want to know like if. Oh, I did read through this. I did read it. So this is the like, if your module is a singleton, you should put a flag in your packages to denote that it's a singleton because we should be handling this appropriately or installing it once or something along these lines to help. I think a good example of this is the gRPC module is a singleton. And if you do like
which module?
gRPC, there's like a node gRPC module that is a singleton. I encountered this at my last work where like if you don't pin versions, you end up with like a few versions of it, and then depending on where you require it, it ends up being a little bit strange. But I haven't. All it is to say that I haven't read through this completely. I think to have a well-formed idea on it.
I mean, I gotta put like a big warning flag on this particular RFC that we need to be very, very careful around, because essentially what we're doing is adding another, like, singleton on a package would mean, please put me, cause dependency hell for all my users.
Yeah, it's a bit strange because you have to hoist the top, right? Like you're effectively forcing the hoist.
That's what like React and ESLint and Babel and the core module of each ecosystem cluster is already doing. It's just there's no programmatic way to do it. So like, I don't know about the specific RFC, but the concept that like React or ESLint or whatever should be able to say like, if you're depending on me, make me a peer dependency unless you're the top level app, because otherwise they have that dependency hell anyway, just without any programmatic support.
Well, so there is a use case, for React where it makes sense to have multiple copies of it.
React itself will warn if you do. What's the use case?
Multiple copies in your package tree. The use case is ink. So essentially, even though you might have only one, you're only going to have one copy of React in the. So I ran into this with Tap, right? One of the dependencies of Tap uses ink to generate pretty reports on the CLI. Ink uses React version 16 in order to generate all of its various stuff, and requires that all its components be React 16 components. But there's no fundamental reason why you can't use Tap to test a React 15 site, because it's not actually loading ink in the same process as the tests are running, right? It's kind of outside of the process boundary. And so it's a completely separate node process. You can have two versions of React in your tree and it's totally fine. Now, I'm guessing that there are cases like that with Babel as well. I don't know why you would use ESLint for anything other than linting. It's really more of like a bin script and configuration type of thing. But I could imagine cases where a similar thing exists for Babel, right? You have some tool that's using Babel that's loading it programmatically, and it's happening outside of the kind of the same process wall as the main application that's using Babel. Like, especially if you're using Babel in build scripts, like there's really no reason why you can't have multiple copies of it. If each build script tool has its own different version of Babel, like that's fine. And so the reason why I want to be very careful about this is it would be very tempting if you're a React developer to slap the singleton label onto React, right? Because at runtime, React can't not be a singleton, right? It breaks and nothing works properly because it doesn't, you're not going to get the right classes, and things just get all kinds of wonky. And this was also one of that case with ink was also the thing that convinced me that we need to at least be pure dependency aware and capable of installing pure dependencies automatically. Because what happened, the workaround that I used with Tap was I just bundled ink and T-report. But the default behavior when the first time somebody tried to use Tap in a React 15 application was it just, because it's a pure dependency, NPM doesn't do anything with it. Inc got hoisted all the way up to the top level. T-report was underneath node tap and had a version of React under node tap because tap specified React 16 as a dep, so it couldn't be deduped. And everything sort of broke and blew up. What should have happened was Inc and T-report should have stayed underneath tap because their peer dependency couldn't be hoisted.
Yeah, it sounds like this, like a better avenue or lens to approach this would be to talk about peer dependencies, which is another RFC, right?
Let's install peer deps again. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that is probably a better avenue to approach this with, because I think, to your point, just slapping a label on singleton in the package.json file is not appropriate because of sort of the implications therein. But peer dependencies is already a thing, right? It's already a type of dependency, just like optional dependencies. So I think approaching it from that lens would probably make it easier to update in-place algorithms that are there already, and allow us to sort of formulate a better way to resolve some of these things, even if not perfect, but a better way to resolve some of these things. And then if that then leads us to something like, okay, maybe we do need a singleton, then cool, let's talk about it then. But I think starting at the singleton label is probably the wrong lens to view this particular problem with, if I'm understanding the problem's statements correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that ultimately this kind of comes down to who should be in control of the shape, the tree shape of an application. Should it be the application developer, or should it be the kind of the library or module developer, and to what degree, to what extent? And I'm very, having gone down this road with peer dependencies, I'm very hesitant to add another thing that gives module authors more control over the tree shape of an application where their module is being used, and where they necessarily lack context to be able to make that decision, right? Like,
yeah, I think that makes sense. So just to move this along, then, can we? I think it sounds like we can probably close this out based on this conversation, being mindful of providing the context, and essentially shifting the conversation back over to the peer dependencies, the Open RFC for reintroducing peer dependencies, installing peer dependencies.
I think Jordan, you mentioned prefer peer, I think.
So not that was what I'm endorsing, but just that seemed like a similar proposal.
Yeah, it scratches a similar itch. That I'd be a little bit more open to. If you install a dependency that has prefer peer set to true, will by default save it as a peer dependency rather than a regular or dev dependency. I mean, that seems a little bit more lightweight, right? So if you install React, like in the vast majority of cases, if you run npm install React, you want it as a peer dependency. Okay, right? If you're building any kind of like module that uses React. And if you happen to install React as a peer dep in an application that is a top level app, like, okay, whatever, it's fine, because the peer deps just get installed like regular deps anyway at the top level. I mean, they don't in npm 6, but they will be. So I think that's probably prefer peer. I have much less misgivings about than singleton true.
Is prefer peer? I haven't seen that used, or haven't used that myself, or that's just the concept that you're proposing, Jordan.
I think somebody proposed it long before RFCs was a thing for npm, so it's just a thing that had stuck in my brain.
Yeah, I couldn't find any reference like in either modules, package maintenance, working groups, or even I think kind of searching around. I think that'd be I mean, that's I'm also in the camp that sort of, I think, solves the problem that you're concerned about, Isaac, in terms of the consumer being the one who's dictating the shape of the tree. So they are actively adding that flag on install, right? Prefer peer. So I think that would solve that. Can somebody maybe take the action to give that feedback? And is there any questions in chat? Anybody raise their hand? No. Okay. So let's keep going then. Can somebody take an action item? Who out of the NPM folks who want to provide some context and maybe circle back on this? Don't all raise your hands at once.
I can circle back on the Singleton.
On the Singleton one? And then, okay, awesome. Okay. Great. And if you can, as you're doing that, just ensure that if it hasn't already been done yet, that the agenda label is removed as well. So, okay, let's keep moving on here. We've only got 2 or 3 items left. So PR number 22, add feature to show dependencies on a particular dependency.
Exists already with npm ls?
Yes, in this case, I believe they were talking about depth. Providing a depth flag was the last. Again, it's PR number 22. So is there depth flag already in LS?
There is, but
Yeah.
so LS right now can either take an argument or you can specify depth. And if you specify a depth, I believe it ignores the argument, or vice versa.
I see.
So the idea here is I want to set npm ls depth equals to package name, and then it will show up to 2 levels of depths underneath that package.
This potentially something that you can do for npm 6? Is this like a level of work that would be? Do we want?
I think that we're going to need to make some deeper changes to npm ls in npm 7. Roy and I were just looking at why npm fund is slow, and
right.
Turns out same reason npm ls is slow, because it reads the package tree and then does a bunch of analysis on it, and it takes a long time. It's a lot of stuff to read. So I've got what we should probably do what I intend to do is write an RFC to describe how npm ls should change in npm 7. And I think that this will either be easy to do or unnecessary. But if you look at how like yarn list works, and some other how pnpm list works, it's essentially just looking at the lock file and then doing the listing operation based on that. So there's no real need to fully realize or fully load in the package tree every time we run npm ls. It's just sort of that way for legacy reasons.
I mean, one of the values of npm ls is that it ensures that, like, regardless of what you have in your lock file or in your node modules folder, that all of the dependency constraints are matched. Would that still be the case if it loaded from the lock file?
I don't know if that's a true statement. npm ls looks at your node modules folder, but it doesn't match constraints for you. It just shows you what's there.
Well, it errors.
It does.
When your dependencies are invalid. I put it in all my CI checks for that reason. And I wish npm install ran it by default to determine the exit code.
Yeah, so it will tell you if something is an unmet dependency, extraneous, or an unmet peer dep. There's no reason. I mean, am I breaking up?
Oh, that's right. No, you're right. You're right.
No, you're good.
Yeah.
You're good.
Okay. So yeah, it will tell you if there's an unmet peer dep. There's no reason why we need to be reading the node modules folder in order to get that info, though, right? Like in the package lock, we're going to have a list of what everybody's dependencies are, and then what versions are currently on disk, and or at least what versions were currently installed. And we can do whatever analysis of that tree that we want.
Is the base assumption that the lock file is always the same as the node modules folder? Is there ever a situation where that's going to become unsync? Because I think that's a base level assumption that you're making.
Tons of anytime anyone uses npm link, or anyone just edits node modules after install, or anyone does npm install and then separately does like npm install, no save, some stuff I just need for this CI run.
Right.
They won't be in. So I agree with Isaac that, like, in the sense that the default case probably can only look at the lock file, but I very much would want the ability to opt into checking node modules on disk as well.
Like, try harder. The thorough case. Yeah. Another possibility, and this is a trick that PNPM uses. It doesn't handle manually editing, but PNPM has a lock file that is in the root of your project. It has a separate lock file which is in the root of your node modules folder.
Yeah.
And the one that's in your root of your node modules folder, even if you do no save, like it always keeps that one up to date. Right? That's basically just like it's notes of like, what did I last put where? And so even if you install something with no save, or you install something that happens to be an invalid dep for somebody else, like it'll still update that kind of hidden lock file.
Are you still of the mind that Arborist has that meta file? Because then we have something similar for npm 7, right?
Yeah. So I ended up folding all of that additional metadata just into the lock file format, and that's kind of what we talked about as being lock file v2.
Yeah.
I need to write an RFC for that too, I guess, even though it's mostly implemented now. The thought though is like, should we write that in both places, right? Should we put that in the root of your node modules folder so that essentially we always have a record of what was done?
I like that idea, because then it makes that the efficiency of diffing between the two things, like, well, what's in my node modules folder? Well, it's whatever's in that, like not hidden, but like separate lock file. And then what am I actually expecting? Well, that's at the top level lock file. And you're going to do all that logic anyways at that top level lock file. So even if you say -- no save, like you just don't do that logic to the top level lock file, but that logic's already baked in, right? So you would just do that to the node modules lock file. And then that way you're not really, it's not extra work, I don't think, to have that. It's just like another file.
Yeah. So another trick we could do is to say if the lock file is not older than the node modules folder, if the date modifieds match, then we know that it's valid.
Because that would change even if you symboling something deeply in that node modules, right?
I believe so. I don't know if it would if you did it deeply.
Okay, so on this specifically though, on this depth, like
I think it's going to be similar
to it's going to be blocked by npm 7.
Yeah, I think it's going to be punted to npm 7.
Okay, so again, just need to add the label for that, and probably just an update would be good in terms of how we want to move forward with this, or just notifying them that it's going to be blocked by a bunch of the refactoring work that's going into npm 7.
Yarn does have a yarn integrity file now that is in the node modules folder, and it's essentially another way to track some of this stuff.
It's in every node modules folder.
I thought it was just in the top level, no?
I was asking, sorry.
Oh, I'm not sure.
Okay.
I would imagine it's just at the top level, Isaac.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, so who's writing the RFC for that one, for the internal
The RFC for what? Sorry.
for the internal log file?
Isaac
This
said he
is-
was going to do V2 lock file.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I can do that.
I think it's kind of associated with your, I believe you had an Arborist
Arborist metadata.
Yeah,
Yeah.
metadata. So I believe it's kind of associated with that, right?
Yep.
Right. Okay.
Essentially,
So,
it replaces that.
right. Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to basically get as far as building up the ideal tree and make sure that I'm tracking the information that we actually need. But this will also make it a lot easier to actually run npm ls much faster, because we'll have all that information, enough information to build up the tree very quickly.
Right.
And also the funding can take advantage of it, right?
Yes. Yeah. And other things, I'm sure. Okay. So actions here to essentially, as I guess you're going to modify the existing RFC then for Arborist or make a new one.
Yep. I'll probably I'll kill the existing one and write a new one.
Okay. Sounds
Or
good.
lock file v2.
Sounds good. And then you can essentially, I mean, this is just backlogged. Like we want to unlock this capability, but it's backlogged. So just adding those labels would be good if anybody's on there, or I can do it after this call, and then taking it off the agenda as well for this issue, number 22. Okay, moving on. PowerShell scripts for installed binaries. I think we had some internal discussion about this.
Yeah, so we went ahead and implemented this. I mean, we had some PRs open against CMD shim. It's causing some problems for Windows 10 users, because apparently running PowerShell scripts requires you to grant PowerShell some additional permissions or something, set some system level permissions to allow scripts to run, whereas CMD scripts did not require this. So I'm not sure what the best answer is, honestly.
Yeah, the fact that we went ahead and implemented it, like I believe that the request here should be to make a new RFC, or to essentially, I guess, make a pull request not ratifying, but like modifying or like adding an addendum or something like to the existing one, if people are having issues with this. Yeah, I don't know, like, would we consider that like a bug of the implementation then, if it's prompting for extra permissions, Isaac?
It's a good question. I think it's a bug in PowerShell. It's a bug in Windows. Tell
Right.
Microsoft about it. No, I mean, it's hard to say whether that's even really a bug, right? Or if it's just, look, these things require additional permissions. If you don't want them, take PS1 out of your default script executing set or whatever. But
So you're saying it's a feature, not a bug?
I really don't know. I don't know, and I hesitate to comment, because I'm not a Windows user, and I feel like I'm taking other people's advice and points of view because they are Windows users, and then other Windows users coming and yelling at me like, "Why'd you do this thing?" So I'm
Right.
not sure what the correct answer is. I mean, I'd be happy to remove it. Like, it's no skin off my back.
Yeah.
So I think that's the action here. Then is like if there's enough traction around essentially removing it, then we can.
Yeah, because what is exactly the pros that we got when we added this? Because the cons is pretty bad. I think I ran into that in my Windows desktop, and yeah, things just simply don't work unless you give you get out of the way and go give it explicit permission.
Do you have to give permission to every script that wants to run, or just is it? I thought it was just a one-time like top level thing.
It seems to me it's just a one time, but I just hit the wall and didn't continue. I just gave up. It was just so bad.
Okay, so it's a one-time thing, but it's pretty bad.
Yeah, it basically doesn't work anymore. So if the thing that we had first just worked for everyone, then it might be better than this one. That
Well, it seemed to work fine, but I guess it you know, if you hit Command C, then it would give them the, you know, terminate bash script prompt that people think is kind of not cool. I really don't know. I need a more.
Yeah, is there an open PR against Command Shim, or there isn't anything? Nobody's actually. Is there? It just says fixed quotes on Windows. That's the only open PR right now. I don't believe that's.
Maybe it was on just CLI.
Which is not the right depth. So if there is an open issue, we should probably direct them to the actual project that.
Here we go. Question: necessity of PowerShell script support for global packages.
Can you provide the link?
Yeah.
Or reference? Thank you. And just to be mindful of time, as we have 15 minutes left, I'm probably going to time box this to another 2 minutes.
yeah, we can also follow up on this one specifically later.
Yeah, agreed. Okay. So definitely, I think that we should add some labels to this question, ensuring that it doesn't get lost. So it needs discussion. And we'll add it as an agenda item just in case it doesn't get. Okay.
I see. So the issue is when you're running something in PowerShell, it doesn't let you run the PowerShell scripts. If you're running it in CMD, it will run the PS1 and be fine, it looks like. Or maybe CMD just only uses the CMD scripts, not the PowerShell scripts.
And the PowerShell scripts need the permissions, which is probably
Right.
what's the gating. That's probably what the gating issue is there. Okay, let's move on. We'll take the action item to circle back on this. And I've added a couple labels on it now too, so it shouldn't get lost. There's two issues left, and I want to make sure that we have time for Jordan's ask to queue up some discussion on I guess V2 work of NPM Fund. Do you actually want to jump to that instead of going over these two? There's PR number 18, interactive audit resolver, and issue number 65, which is essentially a request for an RFC. So I think that's pretty straightforward. I don't think there's much to discuss actually on that last one. I'm gonna remove the label.
I think it's quick. If you do want me to go, just let me know.
Yeah, sure. Do you want to go first then, Jordan? Feel free to.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just I mean, I'll take the time to write up an RFC, of course, and I'll probably write the implementation because it should be trivial. But basically, I want to make funding take a thing or an array of things, where a thing is what it currently takes. And that's because packages have multiple maintainers, and single maintainers like myself have multiple funding sources. And I don't want to have to make a landing page for those. That would suck.
Yeah, I think the original RFC actually had that. I think I had an array, like you were allowed to do that. So yeah, if you're gonna put something together, that's awesome. And PS, thanks for
Cool.
the other PRs that have come in over the last couple of weeks. So appreciate
Sure.
it.
Yeah, so cool. Then as long as I just wanted to get like a temperature of you folks. So like if people generally chill about that, then I'll take the time and write the RFC.
Yeah,
I'm happy to do it.
I think Isaac had some comments, and I mean, you can expand on it. Isaac yourself had some like, we want to keep the scope very limited initially, and it also makes it harder for us to do anything with that information then on like the website. So like, I know that actually right now the shape, I just made a PR for bubbling up the npm fund information on the package pages on our website on npmjs.com. And if the shape is now can be an array, it makes that a little bit harder for us to direct people.
Well, I mean, I would assume it's the same as like the sponsor button on GitHub, which is that they, you know, and they of course privileged the GitHub sponsor thing, but effectively the rest of them, it's just a list. And so I assume that as long as the design accommodates multiple items, which of course is the part I can't help with, then the implementation should be relatively straightforward on top of that. So I can't speak to the design difficulty, but and obviously there's a little bit of design difficulty that if I'm doing the CLI implementation, I would have to resolve about how the printout works with multiple items. But assuming that that could be resolved, then it feels viable to me, but that's why I was trying to get, you know, you folks' opinions before I took the time to write stuff.
I mean, I'm all for that. I looked at that as an opportunity also to highlight potentially, I look at funding as when I wrote the initial RFC to be utilized in both the sense of future funding opportunities as well as the existing, let's say, backers or patrons, like a field in which you could also be identifying those people that potentially help fund the development work of that, let's say, you know, package version. And so, yeah, allowing for multiple entries there, I think is a natural next step. And like how it looks, we can discuss like based on when you have some time to put that together.
Cool. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. And so we have about 5-10 minutes left. Let's try to get, I guess, to PR number 18. Interactive audit resolver. I think we've brought this up before, and this has quite a bit of traction from the author. Does anybody have any context on this or has looked through this RFC?
We're talking about the interactive audit resolver?
Correct. So this was,
I had looked at this like last year sometime, I believe.
Yeah, and I know that I mean, our security team, Adam, has also been like, this is great. This is a cool thing.
This is definitely in the area of like cool feature, not a priority for me to do right now.
Okay, we'll punt it then. Backlog that for sure, and say that it's essentially V7 blocked by V7 work.
There may also be you know, an interesting thing about npm v7. Got talking to the team that manages the security microservice, because there's a what was the issue I ran into?
They were trying to like run up and down the tree, right? When they found if you found an issue with a particular version, like who required that, like running up and down the tree. You were solving that with our burst.
Right. So yeah, so they have a what they have to do is basically go through the entire package tree that you upload and make an index or an inventory of every package by a given name that exists within that tree, and then link that to the advisories that we have on our side, on the server side, and do the Semper calculation to see if it's a version that's resolved against that. The issue that it ran into was basically if it shows that the package is, or that the tree is not valid for some reason, potentially because there's a unmet dependency or something else, then it would just throw an error and be like, I can't do it. So that causes problems when you have bundled dependencies or you're depending on a Git repo, because we will redact that out. There was an RFC, or I think just a pull request to the CLI to specify like, no audit redact or something. I think first that they did it as an environment variable, and I was like, oh God, no, like this needs to be a proper command or not at all. Proper config or not at all. But, and I think there's either a request for RFC or an RFC to not redact when sending audits.
I think there's about two. I think that I've seen at least two in the wild that we should try to probably bubble up and or consolidate the work and effort around this. Yeah.
So what Arborist would let us do is basically have a better way to load a tree that then the security microservice can be more deliberate about specifying exactly what the changes to that tree would be. And so that's something that will probably be coming. And then if we want to do the the interactive resolver, we could do that then.
Sounds good. Okay, so let's say that is, or as at least this work is also blocked essentially by npm 7. And I know that there's, to your point, Isaac, I know that there's at least one or two other discussions happening in the wild around something similar. And Jordan even piped up and said that he would love a npm audit ignore or something similar, like capability like that. Yeah, which is a bit more surgical than no audit.
Mainly it's the like, and I was talking with some folks at GitHub today as well, like the majority of CVEs are false positives. Like literally every catastrophic backtracking regular expression CVE is irrelevant for any linter plugin, for example. And like, I just want a way to ignore that. Yeah, and I mean, I can handle dev deps by using -- production, but like, I actually would like audit warnings about my dev deps. It's that many kinds of warnings don't apply when they're used within dev deps, and that, like, I would love a way to say that like this warning anywhere within the tree of this package, ignore it. It'd be even better if I could define those things as a maintainer, so I could publish a package and say this warning when it's used by me, it should be suppressed, and then nobody else has to see it ever.
I think that goes back to Isaac's comment earlier about who like should be in control of like the consumer or the
you want a way to like affirmatively attest that like I as the app maintainer or as a library author I have looked at this advisory with this particular number. I know that I am not vulnerable to it because I'm not using the thing in that way. So when the thing to consider there when it comes to library authors is you probably want a way to like not just have it be turned off, like I don't necessarily want to trust you if you say that you're not vulnerable to something.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that's surface area.
I might still be like, well, no, I still want to get warned about that. But included in the warning, it could be like, yeah, the the author of NYC has affirmed that they are not vulnerable to this particular YAML parsing bug because they're only parsing your config file. Like, So it's
right. And then the consumer could have a way to indicate like, I accept this maintainer's override, never bother me with it again, for example. But yeah, I agree that you also don't want to hand out trust to authors, especially in the case of someone like hijacking a package or something.
Right.
Or just like, I don't want to be bugged by this, right? Like I'm annoyed because people keep posting issues, and so I'm gonna just turn it off, which is a shockingly common thing.
Right. Just be mindful of time. I think we're pretty much at time here. And I want to say a big thanks for everybody jumping on today. The meeting notes will be posted quickly after this, and the recording of the live will be on YouTube. So again, the next time we'll be getting together will be in 2 weeks, same time, same place. And thank you everybody for jumping on today. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Rob.